Hello, and welcome friends from across the globe to our 12th session of the Wharton Ready Livecast series. In this series, we bring you the very best of Wharton faculty research and insights to help us move forward from our public health and other social issues confronting us. It is my pleasure to be with you today. I'm Sue Wharton, and I lead the team that works with clients on our tailored business portfolio. It is my pleasure to introduce Nikolai Sigelko, speaking on an extremely relevant topic of connected strategy in the age of COVID-19. Nikolai's research interest covers competitive strategy, the evolution of fit, and firms as systems of interconnected choices. For those of you new to the series, I would like to direct your attention to a few housekeeping items. Nikolai will provide a set of opening remarks and we'll leave the final 10 minutes or so for Q&A. Our moderator, Ed Siri, will compile questions and pass to Nikolai for answering. Please type questions in the Q&A box. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please access the moderator box, type those questions in here. We have a team of professionals that will be able to assist with those issues. Thanks again for joining today. Nikolai Sigelko, it is my distinct pleasure and honor to turn the controls over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning from Philadelphia. It's certainly my pleasure to spend some time with you this morning to talk about strategy. Now, some people ask, why talk about strategy now? And indeed, if you're seriously struggling to survive the next sort of 4 weeks financially, I would say, please stop watching, go back and rescue your company. If that's not the case, and I hope it is not the case, then we can really start talking about strategy again, because the strategic issues that you faced as an organization about 4 months ago probably haven't disappeared, right? They're still there. And the other kind of interesting new facet of strategy is, of course, many of you will sort of interact with customers again, sort of almost for the first time, right? Or in a very different way, and all of a sudden now you have a more personal connection again. And so I think there are some really big opportunities right now to, in some sense, reshape fundamentally of how you interact with your customers, and sort of an interesting opportunity, I think, but also, of course, a big challenge if we get it wrong. Now, the other little point I want to make is that times of slow business can be a great opportunity to, what I call, so fix some potholes, or maybe to lay some new fiber, right? So things that in the normal operations are pretty disruptive, right? You have to close down a street or rip open a street to do these kinds of investments. But sort of periods of slow business can be actually great opportunities to get sort of some of the infrastructure in place to really then accelerate once business picks up again. What we think about connected strategy and connected customer relationships is really not just having transactions with customers, but truly having relationships. And again, I think right now is an interesting time, right? If you reflect for yourself, sort of as a customer, during this time, for which companies do you really felt like you had a relationship with them, right? That had a truly kind of trustworthy relationship with you, and which companies do you really just see kind of as creating transactions with you? And I think kind of the current crisis really has just accelerated kind of that importance, right, of trust relationships and creating these connected strategies. Now, the other interesting thing that really this current time has highlighted is that connected strategies are not just between you and your customers, but they can also be really powerful inside organizations, right? How do we connect inside our organization, share information, and remove sort of some pain points within our organization, not just between us and our customers? So with that, what do we actually mean by connected strategy? And it's a topic that my colleague Christian Terwisch and I have been working on for a while. And to us, really fascinating to see that across the whole set of industries, companies, organizations are really trying to fundamentally reshape the way they interact with their customers. Right? Rather than sitting here waiting for a customer to come to us with their needs, can we proactively be connected to our customers, potentially anticipate some needs, and having now many more sort of smaller, fewer interactions with our customers, rather than having just few big episodic interactions. Now, again, we've talking a lot for, unfortunately, good or bad reasons right now about healthcare. And I think healthcare is a great example of that. In the normal state of affairs, right, I only see my doctor or go to the hospital if something really catastrophic happens to me, right? And then, of course, once I am in the hospital, for instance, I have tremendous attention on me, right, 24/7. But then at some point, they decide, well, now you're good enough, and they discharge me, and now I'm completely unconnected again. And we're basically waiting for something catastrophic to happen again to me before I get readmitted. But in the moment you say it that way, you see this cannot be efficient, right? Either for me as a patient or as a customer, and certainly not efficient for the healthcare system. And I think this is sort of the big, and to us, exciting piece of connected strategy. If you do it right, you can both increase the willingness to pay of your customer or the value you create for your customer, while at the same time reduce costs, right? And so if we can do both things at the same time, we're actually creating more value, and that can create some exciting opportunities. So in healthcare, of course, now we are seeing more and more kind of, for instance, connected devices. This, for instance, is an asthma inhaler that allows now my healthcare physician to understand not only when I've taken my medication, but have I taken it correctly, right? And all of a sudden, right, there is a much deeper connection between me and my healthcare provider. So when we think about connected strategies, there are really two different elements. On the one hand, we have what we call the connected customer relationship. On the other hand, we have the connected delivery model. So the connected customer relationship really improves kind of what we call the willingness to pay or the perceived value of the customer, whereas the connected delivery model really helps us to reduce cost, right? And again, if we can do both at the same time, that really creates disruption. Now, this morning, I only have time to talk a bit about the connected customer relationship. And to do that, sort of let me use an example. I actually like to cook, but what a pain, right? Usually when I cook, the first thing I do is I kind of rifle through a magazine to find a nice recipe, right? Then I go through my pantry to see what I have. Then I go into my fridge, which basically looks like that, to see what I need so I can finally come up with my grocery list, right? So then I jump into my car, I drive to a grocery store. Of course, I wear my mask. And of course, I cannot find everything in that grocery store, so I have to go to another grocery store. Then I jump back into my car, I drive back home. So finally, I can do what I like, right? Cooking. Now, after I'm done cooking, I have always these leftovers, right? And it's always the cilantro, right? I just needed 2 sprigs, and now I have this cilantro rotting in my fridge. Not a particular good customer experience. Now, contrast that to what actually has happened in my household for the last 2 years. And that is every Saturday, I get this. Right? I get a box. That box has 2 recipes or 3 recipes and all the ingredients that I need. Now, to me, again, the interesting point is that sort of my happiness, right, as a customer is not just affected by what's in the box. Of course, it's helpful and important that what's in the box is relatively high quality, but really what drove my happiness as a customer was all these other pain points, right, that you were able to remove from my life. So this is what makes me as a customer happy. Now, on the supply side, by Blue Apron, HelloFresh, Home Chef, right, a number of these companies, what have they done? They've really kind of connected me now, in some sense, directly to a farmer, right, sort of through their box. And they've really streamlined the supply chain. So a lot of the investments that you need, wholesalers, grocery warehouses, grocery stores, right, we don't need to have all of that to get the product onto my table. The other thing that Blue Apron really has solved is the following problem, right? If you are Whole Foods, right, a retailer, one of the key questions is, right, how many avocados to stock, right? Because they rot at the same time you don't want to run out of them. And that's a difficult question. Now, the intriguing thing is for Blue Apron, they never run out of avocados. Why? Because if they don't have avocados, you know what? It's asparagus on the menu this week. But here's another interesting point of connected strategies. If you understand your customer really well, sometimes you can direct the customer to a solution to their problem for which they are basically indifferent about to another solution, but that particular solution for you is much cheaper to provide at that point in time, right? So frankly, I don't care whether it's avocados or asparagus on the box this week. So if it's much cheaper for you to send me the asparagus this week, do it, right? And then next week you send me the avocado. So the problem, I think, that a lot of organizations, a lot of companies have is that we are interacting with our customers in a mode which we call buy what we have, right? Here we are, a company, and we sit here and we wait for a customer to come to us with their particular needs. And then if they're lucky, we have what they need, right? It is the buy what we have mode. And that, I think, really avoids or doesn't exploit a lot of the ways we could actually create value for our customer, right? This is just about kind of what price do we offer or what the quality of our products. And of course, those are all important, but there are many other ways of how we can actually delight our customers. So it's really helpful to think about sort of the entire journey that a customer has with us, right? And that journey is much longer than just sort of this element here around the experiencing of the good or the service that the customer has with us. So this journey in some sense starts out with some latent needs, right? There are some needs of, yes, I need to feed my family, or a latent need is, at retirement, I would like to have a relatively safe financial situation, or I have a latent need of staying healthy, right? So these are these latent needs. Now, usually we say, well, shouldn't I always be aware of those needs? Actually not, right? It turns out customers, patients, students, whoever they are not always aware of their needs at optimal time. So when I turn 60, it's not the optimal time for me to become aware, oh, I need to actually save for retirement, right? When I'm lying on the floor with a heart attack, it's not the optimal time to become aware of my healthcare needs. So that's the awareness of the need. Now, once I'm aware of my need, let's stick with the financial, retirement planning saving example. So now I'm aware, I should be actually saving for my retirement. Right now comes the big question of, so how, right? What are all the options that are out there? And of course, quite often there are many, many options out there, and many options I'm not even aware of. So if you can help me to think through what are actually all the options and then help me decide what the right options are for me, a lot of value can be gained, right? Then I need to order. So let's say I now know that I need some well-diversified portfolio. So the question is, how do I order these mutual funds, let's say? Well, can I do it myself? Do I need a broker? How do I pay for it? When do I receive the product? Right? These are all pain points here where you could potentially delight the customer and create sort of a trustworthy relationship with your customer. Then, of course, right, we need to deliver the product and have a good product. So this is certainly still very much important. But then also, even after you've delivered your product, right, my needs as a customer might change. How much am I staying in touch with you, helping you kind of to revise the products that you have or to, upgrade, downgrade, etc. So it is not just about, right, what products or services do we provide to a customer, but it is, how does the customer actually go about, right, trying to identify, ordering and paying for the product, and even more fundamentally, right, why does a customer even engage with us in this interaction? So thinking through these questions of, right, what are the pain points along this entire journey? How can we remove them, and kind of what information would be necessary for us to remove them? Because at some point, right, you need to get some information from your customer. But if you're just asking point blank, well, give me all the information that we can gather, that's really not helpful, right? Because customers are hesitant in sharing information for some really good reasons. But if we can pinpoint and say, look, this is this one piece of information that I would need from you, and now I can show you how I can make your life actually better because I can remove that pain point, that is how you slowly build up trust with customers, that they're actually willing to share more information with you. So when we think about these different connected customer experiences, we can really think about them as acting on different parts of this customer journey. So one type of connected customer experience we call a response to desire customer experience. What that means is a customer has already moved through this first part of the journey by him or herself. They know exactly what they want. Now they want to click a button and have this second half of the journey be as smooth, as frictionless as possible, right? So I know I would like to watch this particular movie. I click and boom, there it appears on my screen, right? That is respond to desire connected customer experience. Now, sometimes I sit in front of my TV and I say, Netflix, I'm in the mood of a comedy tonight. Now, if Netflix responded with that, say, that's great, Nikolai, because we've got 10,000 comedies for you, that still would not be helpful, right? So this is the second type of connected customer experience, which we call a curated offering, right? Can we actually help the customer thinking through what are all the options out there and what might be a good option for you, right? So that is Netflix saying, great, you like comedies, how about one of these 5? And by the way, by 2 of these, maybe you have not heard about because they just recently came out, right? So they expand the range of products or services or ideas that I get exposed to and maybe help me sift through, right, this huge catalog of possibilities. You know, quite often in the B2B setting, what I've seen is that companies really pride themselves on the thickness of their product catalog, right? And they come to a customer and say, look, we've got 10,000 options, right? And isn't that great? And the customer usually say, no, it's not great. Just show me the 5 that I actually need, right? So this curated offering can, again, be quite powerful. Now, moving even one step back in the customer journey, a connected customer experience we call coach behavior is helping a customer become aware of their needs at more optimal times, right? I know as a customer, let's say, want to take my medication, but I'm forgetful. I want to lose some weight. Can you help me? Quite often, customers, patients, clients, right? They want to achieve certain goals, but have a hard time doing it. So if we can help them by nudging them, etc., right, to achieve these goals, again, some value can be created. And lastly, right, sometimes firms know about your needs before you may even be aware of it, right? So for instance, a printer knows that it's about to run out of ink. So why couldn't that printer just reorder its ink automatically, right? Once I've given the printer the permission to do so. So that is a connected customer experience we call automatic execution, right? So here the company may be aware of your need before you are aware of it. And if you've given them permission, they can basically shortcut this entire customer journey and solve that problem for us. Now, one important point here is that we don't think automatic execution is always the best or most desired connected customer experience, right? Some customers love that, some customers hate it. So one phrase we quite often use is that connected customer experience quite often lie at that thin border between magic and creepy, right? Some people say, wow, that was a magical experience. You even know that I had this problem and you solved it. Isn't that wonderful? And another person says, how did you know that I had that problem? I find that creepy, right? And so we really have to understand different customers have different preferences of how much they want to have these automatic execution experiences. And we really have to understand those and really try to create a whole set of these connected customer experiences. My last point here is really that, of course, we can create connected strategies between us and our customers, be they individuals or be they businesses. But what we've really seen is we can also create connected strategies inside our organizations, right? Think about the legal service department or think about the IT group within your organization, right? Quite often, these groups work on a buy what we have model, right? They're sitting there and waiting for customers, basically, to come to them with a problem, right? And then I try to help you, and it's in some sense buy what we have. Oh, sorry, I don't have that solution. Oh, I never thought about it. Let me research that, etc. Right? It's a very reactive mode. And so the question is, right, can we create also connected, proactive strategies inside our organization that might help us anticipate these needs of our internal clients, our internal customers? So summarizing this, we think about building connected customer relationships is really a way of thinking about 4 different R's. We have to recognize the need of our customer or help our customer recognize their needs. Then we need to transform that information into a request for a desired solution for that particular need. Then, of course, we as a company have to respond in a timely way to that request. And hopefully we can do this many, many times. We have many repeat interactions with that customer that help us over time becoming better and better in recognizing, requesting, and responding. Now, that was a lot in kind of 15 minutes. So Krista and I published a book about exactly a year ago now. And what was fun on working on this book is that we were able to teach it while we taught it. So we wanted to make it as applicable as possible. So you can go also to our website, connected-strategy.com, to find a lot of material on this book, worksheets you can fill out, podcasts, etc. But so, if you want to have more of those ideas, this is one resource I can direct you to. All right, great. So let me turn it over to the Q&A. Looking very much forward to hearing some of your questions. Ed, please.
Great, thank you, Nikolai. So the Wharton moderator team has been monitoring all the questions that have been coming in. So a few things to start off with. We will be distributing PDF versions of today's presentation, so be on the lookout for that. And please use the Q&A function to ask additional questions, as we do have some time here. So Nikolai, the first question, which was a popular one coming in here, is do you think technology is an important factor for having a better connected strategy?
Yes, right. I think technology is really why we see connected strategies now rather than 15 years ago, right? What these technologies really allow us to do is to create these great customer experiences at lower cost. There's always a trade-off between creating a great customer experience and raising your cost, right? So that trade-off, of course, always existed. Now what technologies have done is they have pushed out this frontier in some sense, allowing us for these new strategies to arise. At the same time, though, I need to point out that quite often the firms who engage in these connected strategies don't develop the technology themselves, right? These technologies quite often are out there. So Uber did not develop cell phones, GPS, and Google Maps, right? They said, look, these are these technologies, we can put them together and create a new business model. So that's why quite often we think about these connected strategies really as business model innovations, not technology innovations.
Great, thank you, Nikolai. So another popular question here would be, do you have any suggestions on transforming a buy what we have business to a one that's more connected?
Yes, and I think kind of it really starts out by kind of mapping out, I think, this customer journey, starting to really pinpoint some pain points, then asking yourself, right, how could we potentially remove that pain point? What kind of information would we need? And start doing it that way. You're trying to boil the ocean quite often doesn't work, right? If you try to do everything at the same time. Also, right, just asking, blanket kind of, can I get as much information from your customer as possible? It's also probably not a good way. So I would start with a sort of a concrete pain point that you can identify, but that quite often then means that we really have to dig fairly deep into sort of that customer journey.
Thank you, Nikolai. So in a time where we are all connected virtually, we augment customer trust for enhancing the virtually. How do we that trust?
Great question, right? Because just trust is really kind of the underlying goal, I think, that we want to engage in and create in connected strategies, right? We eventually want to be able to fulfill what we think about as more fundamental needs of our customer than just sort of the transaction that we're currently seeing. Now, I think, again, the way to build trust is by having a quid pro quo of saying, customer, I ask you for a little bit of information, and in return, I will give you something that makes your life better, right? And that can happen virtually, right? I don't think we need to have a in-person transaction to have this happen. So one example I like quite often to give, is Amazon. Because Amazon at some point asked me, so Nikolai, can we have your credit card information? And I said, that's sort of a little bit iffy, but okay, I'll give you a credit card information, right? And in return, they gave me a button, right? And now I can click that button, and that made my life easier, right? And so again, there's sort of this little quid pro quo kind of, right? I say, okay, I gave you something, you removed the pain point, right? And sort of over time, they've been removing more and more pain points along these ways. Ed.
Great, thank you, Nikolai. And to kind of build off that a little bit more, maybe could you provide some ways to approach customers now in this difficult times, because everyone's kind of struggling, like you mentioned earlier, but building trust, how do we kind of approach them in the first place? Now, knowing that maybe they're not in the best of shape or not in the best of times. Yeah,
no, again, I think it's a great question. And that's kind of what I meant by my earlier bullet point of, I think, right now is a great opportunity, I think, actually to create these new relationships with customers, because in some sense, you're quite often starting almost a new relationship with many customers. So I think there is sort of, I think, some desire kind of, right, of creating this. And I think The intriguing thing is right now, kind of by having engaged in more of these kind of virtual interactions, I think the sense of, okay, it's maybe not so bad if I share some information. I think at least there's sort of a readiness, but of I think customers to engage with you in these kinds of relationships. At the same time, though, again, I think we have to be really, really clear about the value proposition back to the customer, right? I'm coming back to that point again and again because I think it's so important because so many companies have not done that, right? So many companies just have said, okay, yeah, please click here. And once you click there, basically you said, you've given me all your information and then I can do whatever I want with it. And I, as a customer, never see the return back, right? And that creates mistrust. That creates, I think, that friction between you and the customer. So again, I think the more precisely you could identify a particular pain point for a customer at the current time and say, look, I want to help you with that. I want to make your life a little bit better. I think that's probably a really good way of starting that engagement with a customer.
Thank you, Nikolai. So a couple questions coming in about different industries that have seen booms during the pandemic. For instance, the consumer packaged food industry in this one example here. So in an instance, they have acquired millions of new customers, say, and they're just wondering, do you have any advice for companies how to use connected strategy that can help them develop and maintain these new relationships that they kind of just developed out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of, it's an interesting point, right? As in any time of crisis, there are challenges and there are opportunities, right? And clearly, we may see some consolidation down the road as well. So those opportunities clearly are there, and I think the question of how can we scale up quickly enough and kind of retain these customers that we've currently have. Now, ultimately, it is always about the value you provide to the customer, right? And is the customer aware of the value that you provide to them? And so I think, yes, I think we've seen some shift right now of customers to certain products. Will they stick? It's an interesting question. So the question is, can we really make sure that the customer continues to see the value in those products and these services? And again, it comes down to not just the product, right? And I think this is sort of the one thing that I would love you to take away from this little lecture this morning is that so often when I talk to managers about asking them what are value drivers of your customer, right? Very quickly they think about tangible and intangible aspects of the product or service, right? So what's the quality? What's the longevity? Maybe what's the brand perception, right? And of course, all of those are important, but all of that is fairly narrow, right? And so hopefully by thinking about this entire customer journey, that allows us to identify many other ways of how we can delight a customer. Because sometimes it is quite hard to differentiate ourselves on the product, right? If you're selling an S&P 500 index fund, it is darn hard, right, to differentiate your product. So I have to compete on other dimensions, right? And so really there, understanding that customer journey might help you to find different ways to differentiate yourselves so that you can keep that customer, right? Even if there's fierce competition along that particular product category that you're in.
Great, thank you, Nikolai. We have time for one more question here before I turn it back over to you for some final thoughts here. Just from the other standpoint, do you see technology maybe being a negative and perhaps losing some of the connectivity that we have in the connected strategy model?
Well, to me, I think technology is augmenting, right? It's not just substituting, right? And I think that's sort of important. Quite often we can have people who interact with other people, right? So if I check into a hotel, let's say, right, if I enable that person on the other side to know so much more about me, then they can actually have a much better relationship or a much better interaction with me, right? So I quite often think about technology not really as substituting personal connections, but really kind of augmenting personal connections. Thank you. All right. Great set of questions.
Great. So on behalf of the Wharton moderator team, we want to thank everyone for answering or asking the great questions. A lot of great questions. And Nikolai, thank you for your answers. I'll turn it back over to you if you have any final thoughts. Otherwise, we can turn it back over to Sue. So Nikolai, you first.
Yeah, no, thank you again for joining us this morning. And, I wish you all the best in these really troubling times. And I hope to see many of you live at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikolai. And I will turn it back over to Sue Wharton now, who has some final thoughts before we wrap up here. Sue?
Thanks, Ed. Session. I thought this conversation about removing pain points and connecting the supply chain is certainly food for thought. Our next session will take place on Tuesday, June 16th at 10 a.m. with Wharton professors Raghu Iyengar, Santiago Galeano, and our special guest Neil Hoyle, who is the Chief Measurement Strategist at Google and a senior fellow at the Wharton School. They will address leveraging data analytics to drive business forward. So certainly another topic that is relevant to all of us on the line. As you can see on the screen, Professor Sigelko works extensively with us in executive education. In addition to the programs you see on the screen, Nikolai and fellow Wharton faculty are designing a new program to address strategy and reinvention during challenging times. Please refer back to the ExecEd website as we constantly are providing more resources for you. And finally, if what you have heard today is something that you would like to explore bringing to your organization, please reach out to a program director, Levent Yarar, or any executive education team member, and we'll be happy to discuss options with you. You know, we have so many ways we're working with our clients, our customers to get through these challenges, and we want to continue doing that. So at this point, giving you your evening, morning, or afternoon back, and thank you so much. See you next week. Bye-bye.